Hey there YouTube, Harviner69 here. Yep, you might have guessed. Today we're going to look at 3D printing, hence the printer. Yes, we're going to look at TPU printing on an Ender 3. Now the reason I'm looking at this today is I've seen a lot of questions asked about is it possible to print flexible materials on a stock Ender 3? Short answer is yes you can. So, hope you found the video interesting, useful. If you did, smack the thumbs up or the thumbs down button. And please leave me a comment below, let me know. I'm only kidding you. Yes, we are going to look a bit more in depth on how to print flexible filaments on a stock Ender 3. Now before we get into it, my Ender 3 isn't 100% stock, it's about 98%. I've got a couple of modifications on it. One being the springs underneath have been changed out for stiffer springs. The feeder gear is being changed for an all metal feeder gear. And I've got a filament guide path put on here and a spin wheel to help the filament in, just to make things a little bit easier. The other thing that I did change for printing with flexible filament, and I found making it easier, was the spool feeder at the top. I changed it out for a one that I found on Thingiverse that uses bearings on the end of it. Now this just helps the spool spin a bit more freer, so when the filament is being pulled through there is less tension on the reel and on the spool itself, and it just feeds so much smoother. So those are the changes that I made, or I have on my Ender 3 for printing with flexible filament. Everything else, the hot end, the heater bed, the build plate, everything else is stock. So before we get into the settings of how to print with flexible filament, what is TPU? Well, TPU is a thermoplastic polyurethane material. Now what does that mean? It means it's flexible. This is my spool of TPU, and as you can see, it is bendy. Now I've got a small section that I've cut off just here. The material itself is stretchy, it doesn't break when you pull it apart, and you can tie it in knots like so, and it doesn't break. Therein lies the problem with the material. Because it is flexible, it tends to want to extrude and come out of the feeder gear up here wherever it can, wherever it wants to, and create a lovely mess everywhere. Now as I said, I changed out the feeder at the gear. That is because as it's feeding down through the filament feed path, sometimes I noticed when I started to print with this, with the original spool holder on the top, the filament would get a little bit taut, and that would cause a little bit of tension on it, and sometimes that would create gaps in layer lines, which we'll see when we look at some of the examples. So switching to that one that has a bit more movement in it and free movement in it eliminated that straight away. So, short interruption on the video there. While I was editing the video for this, I realised I forgot to mention one crucial fact, and that is the software I've been using to do the slicing with. Now with this I've been using Cura version 4.6. Now the reason being is I normally use Simplify for this, but I wanted the software to be accessible to as many people as possible, so these settings could be used by as many people as possible. Now I do use Simplify 3D as my normal go-to slicer, but that does cost, whereas Cura is free, hence the use of Cura. So going forward, everything referenced in here is Cura version 4.6. So back on with the video. So, printing with TPU. I'll put my settings on the side here. You can screen grab those as you please and use them if you want to. By all means, these are not definitive, they're not final. I will probably still keep tweaking and playing with my settings. One thing to say when printing with TPU is there is a smell. If you've ever had an inflatable beach ball or a paddling pool or anything like that, and you can smell that plastic, that's what this smells like when you print with it. Personally, I don't mind the smell. Some might not like it, so just to be warned. Now, when I print with mine, slow is key. Now by that I mean 20 millimeters a second. That is how fast I print on my stock Ender 3 with a Bowden setup for TPU. It is painfully slow, and prints do take an awful long time to print. However, the slower you print, the more chance you have of success, and the better your print will actually be at the end. Now I run mine, this is Sunlu TPU in blue. It recommends on the spool itself here, print temp 190 to 210. I actually run it at 230. I tried at the suggested print temperatures and everything was just a failure. It never seemed to extrude smoothly. It wasn't until I upped the temperature to about 230 that everything printed smoothly. Now the print bed I run at 60 degrees and keep it at 60 degrees through the whole print. and as you can probably see here, I do put glue on the print bed as a release agent. I've read nightmare stories of TPU prints sticking to the PIE sheets, etc., and ripping them, so I put glue on mine, just a thin layer of glue stick. It also helps to ensure that the prints stick. Now when I print with TPU, no matter what size print I do, I tend to always print with a skirt, usually about 20mm from the edge, solid 20mm skirt, just to make sure that everything sticks down, because of the time it takes to print with TPU, the last thing I want is the print to be lifting mid-print. Now when it comes to settings, if you've watched the settings on the side there, you might have noticed I print everything with 3 walls, and all these examples I'm about to show you are printed at 0.28mm height. Now when it comes to leveling the print bed prior to printing with TPU, it doesn't like much squish on the first layer. Now by that I mean normally when you do your paper test, if that's how you level yours, if it's not automatic, if you haven't upgraded it to an automatic bed leveling, the paper has a bit of resistance, a very small amount, but a bit of resistance when you do it. I up that so the paper barely touches the print nozzle when leveling the printer. Now your mileage may vary, you might have to adjust it. By all means, if you're going to print with this, start with some test prints and just get a feel for how close the nozzle has to be on yours. Filaments change and filaments are different from brand to brand. This is Sunlu TPU, yours might be different, but just bear in mind, not as much squish as you do with PLA. One thing I almost forgot to mention on the settings is turn retraction off. With a Borden setup, with you pushing the filament forwards and backwards through the extruder with retraction, it will have a tendency to bind up on the feeder gear and tend to push out through the top of the feeder gear there. So when you're printing with this, turn retraction off, and one setting I did find that helps to reduce stringing and blobbing on your prints is to keep the print head within the print, don't cross perimeters. This does add print time, as it means when the print is moving from point A to point B, it doesn't move in a straight line, it'll move in a direction to keep the print head inside the model itself. That way you don't get blobbing and strings pushing around the roll internal to the model where it doesn't matter. So how did I get mine dialed in? Well, you might have seen, but on Thingiverse there is a flexible octopus print. I printed an absolute crap ton of these things. So let's take a closer look at some of these prints that I did. So these are a sample of some of the octopuses that I printed. Now you'll see we've got blue, white and yellow. I only have blue filament left. The white and the yellow were sample filaments that I got a long time ago, and to be honest they sat around for ages. When I tried to print I got a lot of stringing. Now the reason being for stringing on TPU is it's very hygroscopic material. Now what do you mean by hygroscopic? It absorbs moisture from the air. But we'll cover more on that in a minute. So we'll get into some of these prints. So as you can see, this is one of the first ones I printed. It's got gaps in the top and there is no infill in the center. I quickly worked out that TPU prints do not like bridging at all. Unlike PLA where you can bridge, I have been completely unsuccessful in bridging without any support with TPU. This was another example. This one was printed in vase mode, and again it's completely knackered. As you can see, the quality is absolutely abysmal. Well, there we go, I've just ripped the head of it off. So you can see it's completely hollow inside. Vase mode for this with the bridging just did not work with TPU. So those were my first examples, my first tries at printing with TPU. So up next we had another one that I printed. This is unsquishable this way, it's almost solid, it's about an 80% infill on the center. There are gaps, I don't know if we can pick this up on the camera or not, there are gaps in the layers there, and that's when I discovered about the filament actually causing a little bit of tension when feeding on the stock spooler, which is when I changed to the one with the bearings on the end. So again, another failure while I practiced printing with TPU. So I went through a number of iterations on printing and eventually got something that was, I think it was this one, yes, this one. Printed a little bit bigger. You can see it's got quite a lot of stringing on it, but it's got a squish. Its layers are fairly good. There's a bit of banding on it on the side here, so it still needs a bit more dialing in. But yeah, I was getting the ballpark with this one, so I was getting a bit more confident. So that's when I bought the blue TPU, and this is the first octopus I printed. It came out fairly well, although with infill, it split. So at this point, I'd pretty much given up print on TPU. I'd had enough. So I set the blue TPU aside for quite some time, and then about 6 months later decided to come back and give it another bash after doing more reading. And when I started printing again with this, I found it was stringing chronically. Looking back on this print to the ones I did afterwards, I just couldn't understand why the stringing was occurring, and that's when I read up about the hygroscopic properties of TPU. So I bought myself a food dehydrator, chucked it in, dried the filament out, tried it again, and it printed pretty much like this again with no strings. So how do you dry TPU in a food dehydrator? Well, I have a little document on my phone here with all the temperatures, because I've got a number of filaments written down. What I do is I put the TPU in at 55 degrees Celsius, that's 131 degrees Fahrenheit, for at least 4 hours. I put mine in for about 8 hours while I was at work one day and just kept an eye on it. And like I say, once I brought it out, I then stored the filament in a Mylar bag, which is just down here, and this is from the company I used to buy my filaments from. They no longer exist, unfortunately, but they are silver Mylar bags that are impervious to moisture, from what I'm led to believe. And I put, just dig inside, a number of silica bags inside there just to keep the moisture out. And then once it's done, ziplock it up and store it. Don't leave it out in the air for any length of time. I mean, yes, this one's out in the air and it will probably have to be dried possibly because it's been out for a couple of days because I'm stupid. But yes, don't leave it out for any length of time. So with that being said, and once I got my prints working, after drying the filament out, I decided, let's print some objects. So let's take a look at the variety of stuff that I printed. So this is everything that I printed with the TPU. Now, the first print I tried was the wallet. I was still playing with my settings at this point. I decided, well, to be honest, I rushed ahead. I thought I had my settings dialed in. I did a little bit more tweaking. Before we look at it, this was the octopus that I printed after I dried the filament. There's a couple of blobs on it, but the quality was brilliant. There was no stringing anymore. And at this point, I thought I'd cracked TPU. So we'll just shift him out of the way. I printed the wallet. In hindsight, I should have done some more testing, but we'll take a look at the wallet closer. So there is the wallet, and on the face value of it, it doesn't look too bad. You can see there's a little bit of texture on the back here, and to be honest, maybe that should have been my first clue that this wasn't going to work very well. On the inside, you can see it opens up perfectly fine. It bends. You can get into the actual money compartment. It all flexes fine. It's supposed to have a coin section with a press stud, but that doesn't quite meet very well. And there's a card section here for it. This didn't print very well. As you can kind of see there, it's lumpy textured. This is printed at a slight overhang. You can see the wallet opens up to the top here. As it goes down, it gets narrower and narrower. So this prints at an angle. There we go, you can see the top part. It doesn't print closed, it prints in the open position. So as it was printing, because it was printing partially at an overhang, it just didn't work very well. So I did some reading on the internet and I found out that if you run a heat gun over TPU, there is a chance that you can fix the prints. You can see on the back here, you'll see the bottom part is a little bit different to the top. And on here, you'll see there's shiny sections up here. Oops, up here. This is where I heat gunned it, so I tried that on the inside. It didn't fix this. It didn't fix the coin part at all, and I melted the side. So if we get a closer look, there you can see I ran the heat gun for too long on too thin a piece of TPU, and it melted and actually stuck to the previous part. So this was about 24 hours, sorry, print. It just didn't work. However, what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at the time lapse of this printing. So as you can see from the clock in the corner of that time lapse there, it did take a long time to print. Yeah, that was a failure. So with that out of the way, I was a little bit disheartened. So what did I try next out of all this lot? Well, I tried a tyre. And the first 2 attempts of this tyre all printed to the same height and then failed. What I realised at this point was a couple of things. One, I slowed my speed down. I was printing at 25mm a second. I slowed it down to 20mm a second. That might have helped. The other thing I noticed was the feeder gear had bits of TPU filament stuck in it. And the third thing, because these both failed at exactly the same point, I thought it might be a bad G-code file. So I trashed the G-code after making those changes, printed the tyre again, and it came out successfully. Now we'll take a closer look at the failure and the actual tyre. So you can see this is the skirt that I used to actually print it with, just to make sure you get a good base to print it on, and they all failed. Well, the 2 that I printed failed at this point with like a soft spaghetti on the top, and after the changes, this is what we came up with. So this tyre has a degree of flex in the top between the infill, you can see there, and if we squish, we can squash the tyre all the way down flat, and it doesn't break the print lines. This was my first successful print and I was absolutely over the moon with this. It is awesome. So yeah, this is printed, like I say, with 3 perimeters. I think this is about a 30% infill, and it just worked. So this was really, really good. So the tyre itself might be functional for an RC model. I did scale it down 50%. I didn't print it at full size. It has very little grip whatsoever. So with this out of the way, I decided to print a tall object, and that was a rocket. And this printed perfectly first time. Flexible fins, bendy rocket. It was awesome. So we'll take a closer look. So that is the rocket. As I say, the fins are flexible. You can bend it. You can squish the rocket, and you can bend it over in 2. And if we look at the bend, there is no break in the print lines. Everything stays intact, even on the sharp corners there. It's brilliant. So at this point I figured, yes, they were the settings to keep, and these are the settings that I've showed you on the side of the screen already. Now I did notice at the top part here, there is a change in colour. We've got a darker blue and then this lighter blue here. I think that is due to the fact that the print head is over the print for a longer length of time, therefore the filament is staying hotter for longer. So possibly moving the print head away after doing each layer for a couple of seconds and coming back again might have fixed this, but with doing that I would have had blobbing. So with that out of the way, the next thing I moved on to was something a little bit more complex, and that was the phone case. This didn't go very well. No, it's not broken. This is the support material for the phone, because this is printed for a Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, which has a very, very large camera bump. Now the creator of this one, by the way, I forgot to mention, all these files are down in the description. They're not my files, so please do check them out and give some love if you like any of these models. So as I was saying, the designer created around the camera bump here an extra few layers to take up the thickness of that camera bump and protect it, and then the case print on top of that. So this prints with the support material underneath to take up that gap, and then the phone case print on this flexible material. Now this is nice. You can squash it, you can do all sorts with it, but we'll take a closer look and see why this failed completely. This is the support material. Like I say, you can scrunch it up and it just comes back. It's great material. I do like TPU. However, because it's printing on this grid and it's got nothing to semi-squash the material into, the back, as you can see all those print lines, and some of them are loose. Now I did try heat gunning this to try and fix it, but unfortunately it didn't work. This is atrocious, the quality is pathetic, and this is just ugly to look at. The inside isn't too bad, that's fairly decent, and the sides aren't that bad. Now yes, it has gaps and it has overhangs, well, bridging that it's done. Now to get these bridging to work, what I did was I printed support material in TPU. It's not brilliant, see if we can get this to separate again. Just bear with me. There is a problem. There we are. There you go, I've just split it. So as you can see there, that's split. It doesn't bond very, very well on bridging. If you have a dual head extruder, you might be able to print PLA or dissolvable material as a support, but TPU itself as a support material isn't the best. It does in a stopgap, but it's not brilliant. So this model, I did try and print it quite a few times in its given state. Unfortunately, every time it just ended up the same on the back. So what I did, printed it flat. I actually put it in the slicer and dropped the model down a few millimeters, so the whole thing printed flat with no give for the camera bump. And to be honest, it printed fairly well. So I mean, yeah, this is it on my phone. It's not a case I will use permanently because I've got a bought one that's much better. But we'll take a closer look at this and see. So there we are. That is the underside of it. As you can see, it is a lot better than the previous one. It just printed really well. First layer flat onto the bed. The inside is the same, and again, you can see the gaps for the buttons at the side and the bottom. This one, again, it's got the same problem with splitting across the lines there, but can't help that. And again, crunch it up, bring it round, turn it inside out, and it just pops back again. It is just an awesome material to print with. So yeah, this was a functional print. It does work and it does fit. There we go, it does fit my phone, but it's not a case I will use. So with that out of the way, I decided to try something a bit more adventurous, and I found this model on the internet. It's an open Bionics hand. Now it prints in that orientation, fingers down. There were no supports used on this, so it had a bit of stringing. However, it works, and if you push the button on the bottom, the fingers and the thumb open. It is awesome. So I'll take a closer look. Here we are. You can see the Open Bionics logo on the front of the hand there. Like I said, that is the side that prints flat to the bed, like so. The problems we have with this is in here is the overhang. It doesn't do this bridging very, very well, and the same on the other side. In there, that didn't work very well. And the same on the palm when it comes up here, some of these bridges, just open these fingers. Just inside here, these didn't print very well at all. You can possibly see they look a little bit rough, but overall the print worked. Now what I will say is, it's awesome. You might notice that just in here it looks a little bit black, and that is because while I was cleaning up the stringing on the model, as you can see, there's to focus, there's still a little bit of stringing on there. It's not 100% cleaned up yet. I did break this joint inside here, so I just used a lighter and melted the plastic back together again, and it works. So yeah, bridges, overhangs, things like that, TPU doesn't do very well with, but as a functional print, this is awesome. I forget who created this one, but I'll have their link down in the description below, but this is one hell of a print. I love it. Bye! Bye! Anyway, so yeah, with that out of the way, I had two prints that I did left. First one was this bracelet. Again, squashy, printed, flat orientation, 100% infill because it is only 3 perimeters thick. And that fits, I mean, it doesn't fit my hand. It's too small for my hand, but it will fit a smaller hand. And the other print I did was a beer bottle cap. So if you sat in the garden on a nice summer's day, you can clip this part around your beer bottle and that on the top of the bottle and seal it up so nothing gets in, no flies, no bugs. So there's a closer look at the bracelet. Like I say, looks a bit like a tyre track. It's a very, very nice design. Wavy pattern bracelet, totally flexible. Like I say, pops back into shape. Absolutely stonking with the settings I've got. And then the other one is the beer bottle cap. That is the orientation it's printed in, flat down. And that's the inside of the beer bottle. I have tested and it does fit and snap on very well. Like I say, that opens and fits around your beer bottle, and that closes up over and seals your bottle closed. Absolutely awesome. So that's my quick rundown on how I managed to print TPU filament on my 98% stock Ender 3 printer. Like I say, the settings I've come up with, they're not final. I probably will keep adjusting these and keep tweaking them ever so slightly. but the prints I get out of these are definitely passable and they are definitely usable prints. Like I said, you will never fully remove stringing on a board and setup. Please do correct me if I am wrong, but at the moment I have not removed stringing fully. Moving with inside the print does help, but if you have better settings or better suggestions, please drop them in the comments, let me know, let the community know. This is the whole point of the video, is to try and help people print with TPU, because some people do struggle. So there we are. That is everything that I know so far about printing with TPU. Do me a favour, if you enjoyed the video or found it useful, instructional or anything like that, please smack the thumbs up or the thumbs down button and let the YouTube algorithm know what this video is like. And if you want to see future content from myself and help the channel, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified about any upcoming videos that I do produce. So until next time, from myself and my awesome hand, see you later. Take care.